Why is America first, as a general policy, considered bad, racist? Like many catchphrases, what it literally says and what it means or connotes are different. Every country has a "my country first" policy. By far, every country spends more on domestic things than foreign aid. But the right-wing "America First" slogan has been used to promote isolationist, xenophobic, racist, anti-immigrant policies. As such, it has taken on negative connotations and is linked to policies that are more radical than the phrase may suggest. Denotation versus connotations. But don't all countries do that? Don't Australians care more about Australia than they do Denmark? Doesn't Japan care about Japan more than South Africa? No, that isn't what America First is. America First is an approach to foreign policy emphasizing isolationism as a lever. It presupposes that the U.S. should not participate in its treaties and partnerships, should not keep its word. Well, that is a large part of the problem. The "if" is inconsistent and varies by whatever the flavor of the moment is. Another major problem is that it doesn't promise to work. The U.S. ranks in the 20s as donators of foreign aid, spending less than 0.2% of its GDP, or roughly $100 per year per American citizen. It is a far cry from a leader there. That amount of money is also not important for meeting domestic needs. If you gave every U.S. citizen $100 per year right now, you would solve nothing. And yet, it has massive impact in the role of the U.S. internationally. Similarly, the U.S. is not a climate leader, producing far more carbon per capita than China, and more than high-tech industrials like Germany. And yet, by participating in standard setting around reducing atmospheric carbon, and being a voice for participation by others, it does help move the needle in reducing emissions and building the kinds of markets and infrastructure that change long-term trajectories. It also, by participating, helps shape these markets to more align with the interests of the U.S. Remember, these are things that will happen. If you take your ball and go home, people still play the game. The same is true for a number of issues: nuclear proliferation, food security, water security, smuggled goods, smuggled people, war, instability. The U.S. is an important player, but only to the extent that it participates. Failure to participate means the U.S. won't be a voice, won't have influence, won't be able to advocate for its interest, and won't be able to participate in the future as people move on. ADN the forum decides the U.S. is too far behind and/or too unreliable. In short, America First is a policy that destroys priceless influence and power, while gaining us very little because, in practical terms, we tend to not dedicate much materially in any of these areas, policies, to the point of what our foreign work costs us. The major exception to the U.S. spending little is military presence. The U.S. is often overrepresented in military presence. This is another intentional strategy, since, if we provide that service, we encourage others to not develop these tools. The alternative is a world where multiple countries have outstandingly deadly weaponry and the capacity to continually invent their own, and so make warfare more chaotic and deadly. If one country takes on that role, and simultaneously sits at many tables, you have a less armed, not more armed, world. This is the same reason we do things like promise to defend Ukraine if they give up their nuclear weapons they inherited and abandon development of a nuclear weapons program. They did so, and now we are failing to provide them munitions. The long-term result of such behavior from us is that they will be interested in developing nukes and other weapons in the future, because they can't rely on us to keep our end of the bargain. That is a more, not less, dangerous situation. And so, a more, and not less, expensive situation. When you wonder why food prices are higher, you need to remember that Ukraine provided almost 15% of the grain in the world. Another way to think of all of this is that the US leaving the table doesn't mean everyone else stops playing. They will play, and in the vacuum left by the US, they will play more chaotically. The superpower framework is centered on the idea that the best answer is that there is one superpower, a single referee. 2 or 3 is manageable as well. More than that, you don't really have superpowers anymore. You don't have centers of authority, alignment. And 0 superpowers is chaos, where you have the most harms. The US is a superpower because it participates in forum building and maintaining those forums. We control trade and warfare in order to protect forums for stability to exist. It isn't a role that will be quickly replaced by anyone. Rather, there will be war as people fight to decide what the new order should be. In 1944, there was a political party which sided with the Nazis. That party was the America First Party. They held rallies with 20-foot portraits of George Washington surrounded by swastikas. Ever since then, that particular phrase has been used by groups, particularly in America, which identify in one part or another with the Nazis, whether it be their eugenics, anti-Semitism, or authoritarianism. It's a dog whistle, in that it's completely innocent at face value, but it kind of has a secret nefarious meaning that everyone knows it's what it really means. But those who are saying it have plausible deniability. Lol at 25% downvotes for asking an honest question. Imagine being that baddie. If that statement was simply about, let's make sure Americans' needs are met first, then sure, then I'd get the America First slogan. Advocate for policies and trade agreements that are to the betterment of your country. As a Canadian though, when putting your countrymen first, that there's a need to understand that you have to make trade-offs. Because the other country as well has needs and priorities. And that collectively and collaboratively you advocate for what you need, and allow the other country to do the same. It often feels that the expectation is that unless you give in to all of our demands, no deal. And that isn't how diplomacy works. You have to give, in order to get, and you can't just take what you want. Is this sub just a Russian troll farm now? Where America First becomes problematic. Ignoring the very problematic historical ties of America First to the KKK and fascism is isolationism, nationalism, and xenophobia, wanting no assistance or money going abroad until all issues at home are fixed. Which of course will never happen. And automatic distrust and, or hate for other races and cultures. See here, America First. You can find similar examples all over the web of the KKK promoting America First. America First gives the impression that we should not be helping others if it is a burden to ourselves. I find this entirely immoral. It is the mark of a decent person to burden themselves for the sake of others, not only loved ones, but strangers as well. America First is one of those trick slogans that feels like it says a lot, but doesn't actually say anything at all. What does it mean to place America first? Does it mean isolationism and a mercantilist economy? Or does it just mean expanding America's foreign influence in order to remain the #1 power? If it means one of those two, to what degree does it mean? So instead you can't just look at the slogan because the slogan is pretty meaningless, but rather the historical associations and implications of the term. America First has largely been based around complete uninvolvement in the world's affairs and white supremacism. America First was originated with the xenophobic Know-Nothings and was used as a KKK slogan in the 1920s. The association between America First and Nazism is so strong that Dr. Seuss even made political comments satirizing it. It doesn't necessarily have to keep referring to those nowadays. But that's often the sort of thing that people are going to see when someone uses the slogan. It's not really all American first. The rich and those with lighter skin tones tend to have huge advantages over marginalized people, just like the good old days. There are certain phrases, words, or symbols known as dog whistles, ways to convey certain messages, allegiances with those in the know, while maintaining a level of plausible deniability. The two lightning bolts, for example, is used by neo-Nazis to signify the insignia of the Schutzstaffel of Nazi Germany. That's one of many that self-identifying neo-Nazis use. Family values seems innocuous enough, but what they're actually signaling is that they oppose queer people entirely, as well as gender nonconformity. What they ultimately value is the impossible, and often harmful, image of a perfect family. The classic nuclear family with masculine boys, feminine girls, an obedient wife and kids, and no deviance from that perfect norm. Ironically, numerous of the family values folk wind up cheating on their spouses. It's important to be mindful that in politics, nothing is neatly summarized with a single sentence. There is a vast amount of nuance beyond what a short comment could possibly convey. The wealthy powers that be want to exploit America with foreign aid and foreign wars. And if you disagree, then you are labeled a racist. To clarify the top post a bit more, the term can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. It's easy to call a belief racist, xenophobic, whatever. It's not so clear when such things are not based explicitly in race for the people who believe them. If you were to read and take Grendelwald's post, you might think that a Republican who believes in this is racist or xenophobic. But look at it through his eyes. He doesn't hate Hispanics because they are a different color. He wants the best for his country. He wants everyone who comes here to be legal, and for things to be the absolute best they can be for his country. He also believes that his country is the best, and that means that people should speak English and so on and so forth. Insert your thing here. But to him this isn't about race. So this is another thing I want you to think about when you are told something simple. Things are rarely as black and white as you are told. It benefits someone to have you believe so. But you can't address a problem you don't understand, or misunderstand. It's not. Every single country in the world operates on this principle, without exception. Some have issues with this because Trump said it, or they have I am better than thou morals issues. Context, context, context. Nobody in American politics wants to put America second. The phrase, America First, has been hijacked by people who are considered to be racist, corrupt, stupid, awful people. The first detail I'd probably address is that the slogan you referenced was adopted by the American Nazi Party. So regardless of what era or culture you're referencing the symbolism of the swastika, people are going to associate it with the Nazis first. This slogan is no different. Moving past the slogan, you're wondering about protectionism and isolationism. That's a sliding scale and can be an independent economic conversation from racism or even xenophobia. Often enough that conversation does get associated with race-based nationalism. However, and so carries a loose association with all that's implied with that can of worms.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Aircast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.